Welcome to Books with Friends. I'm Chantel, your host, and I'm really glad that you are here with me tonight. It feels especially fitting to be kicking off the second season of Books with Friends during the centennial celebration of Black History Month with none other than Octavia Butler's Parable of the Talents. And I'm especially excited to be joined with my dear friend Stefani Roth to dig into this work. We last season, our first season, we discussed Parable of the Sower. And so after that, we were pretty geared up to continue the journey and to read Parable of the Talents together. And so you all, we get to have a conversation about just that. One of the things that I've come to believe is that reading literature is not just about reading, but it's really about thinking with a book. Books, the best of them, they help us to realize and to examine ourselves, our communities, our beliefs, and the systems and structures that govern our world. And I think that that's what's really precious about them. And Books with Friends, this space, is a small literary salon where we get to sit inside books with one another and have really deep conversations that stretches our thinking and allows us to imagine our world present and our world past and our world future. And one of the questions that I want us to keep sitting with as we go through books with one another is, what does this book help me to see about what it means to be human right now in this time and space? So again, tonight, I'm so excited to be turning our attention to Octavia Butler's Parable of the Talents, to be sitting with Stefani, a great friend and a great conversationalist and a really great thinker. So I'm excited to hear her thoughts about this work. And without further ado, let's just jump right on into it. Stefani, welcome. Welcome.
Thank you, Chantel. What an incredible essential question you start this with. What does this book help me see what it means to be human in this time and place?
Yeah.
This was a heavy book.
Yeah.
It was a very heavy book. And I noticed in this latest edition, I did read it on my Kindle, in just the reading that I had, and I don't know how many more people hopefully read the print book, which I have the print too, but over 648 people highlighted where there is a rallying cry that feels very similar, literally, to make America great again.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of a teaser. So before we dive into that, maybe we should back up a little bit.
Yeah.
But it just, my head went right to it when you said about what it means to be human in this time and place.
Yeah. I definitely, I think I remember when you stumbled across that, because you started reading it before I did, and you called me. And we had like a brief conversation around it. And I think that's a huge number of like people that have highlighted or saw that word stuck out to them. And that's just the Kindle version. I'm sure people reading, right?
Yes.
Struck out with them too. I know when I came across that, it did. It's hard to miss. You can't miss it in this time of being human with it. And I think it kind of is a good segue into one of the things that I wanted to talk about first, which is around beliefs.
Yeah.
So in Parable of the Sower, we see Lauren, who is this child, and we meet her in a time when literally her world, like that image behind you, is in chaos and it's crumbling and it's fire, right? And she has this belief system that she develops. And I think at first I experienced it as almost like poetry of thoughts written down that she's captured, of things that make sense to her in her mind, despite what she's seeing, despite what she was raised with, such as all that you touch, you change, all that you change changes you, God is change, right? And then as we journey into Parable of the Talents, and we have an older Lauren, and she's no longer in her, in her home. She's at this home that she's created with her husband.
Mm-hmm.
and an adult, we see that the earth seed, the idea of it, has broadened into a different type of ambition. Where in the beginning, I think it was for her, and then it grew, and she had followers. And when she had followers, there became hierarchy, there became structure and order, and something kind of shifted in it, in that aspect. And so I think, like, a question that I wanted to start with that does tie to this Make America Great Again, which is a different type of belief, right? But it's
Mm-hmm.
still it's a belief system.
Mm-hmm.
Is um, we see Earth seed evolving into becoming something very concrete, and I wonder if it was immune. Like, do we think it was immune from becoming the thing that it resisted?
I mean, I think that's what Octavia Butler asks us to wrestle with the
Yeah.
entire time is
Mm-hmm.
like, what is that tipping point when it goes from a belief system into almost a theology?
Yeah.
And then what is the demand where it starts to sort of touch like a soft authoritarianism? Because in order to get more people to align to the belief system, they have to believe. Now, obviously, she wasn't doing it with the kind of like uh, religious intolerance that you hear,
Right.
like Jared, the leader of the newest party, do, where there are fear tactics and
Mm-hmm.
things of that nature. But there is a sense of which what I do think she was different. I'm sorry, I'm shifting a little bit because
No.
I think
Yeah.
what the place where she didn't shift yet was she said, "You are welcome to be
Yes.
here,
Yes.
even if you do not believe,
Yes.
even if this is not what you will adopt. However, I do insist that you engage with it."
Mm-hmm.
And that's different than, sort of you're on the bus, you're off the bus, or you
Right.
must comply. And holding that space in the middle is, as a world, as a country, as a universe, is what we don't
Mm-hmm.
do very well. We
Right.
we we fly, and maybe that's it. Maybe that's that space, that middle ground that we don't seem to be able to take root in, that allows for the differentiator between what becomes soft authoritarianism on
Mm-hmm.
either end of the spectrum of beliefs.
Right. And I think with that, though, we did see where people who did believe had certain privileges.
That that's true.
So, and that all of the people there were, life was hard. These were displaced people. These were fragmented families, right? These were people who, I'm waking up and I'm having to think about survival,
On a
maybe a
daily
little
basis.
less or a little differently from before, when maybe I was out on my own, or wondering, but still in this space, I'm thinking about survival, I'm thinking about protection. And in this space, I don't have to maybe work as hard to earn money, right? Because by this point in the talents, they have some means and some systems. I don't have to. It's not just on me to feed my family or to feed myself. There's community and some sort of stability here. So people who were believers of Earthseed, they had certain privileges that some of the others didn't have, you know.
Was it a continuum though? Because like I guess so. I think that they were under an illusion
Hmm.
a little bit that this sort of, we could be acorn, we can live
Yeah.
here, we can have our
Hmm.
belief system, we can sort of pick and choose who may or may not come in our community.
Hmm.
And then up the road, they have the huge killing of the Dove
Yes.
Tree
Yes. Of the dove
grouping.
tree. Yes.
And there was 60 there. I think everybody got killed except for a couple of women and children, but even children got slaughtered.
Right. Right.
And so then all of a sudden there were 64 of them.
Hmm.
And I had to look that up. I did not remember that.
I'm so
Um,
impressed that you did.
no, 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 no. Don't be impressed. I looked it up. But because I was just curious about what was the actual size of
Right.
acorns so that I could understand what it meant to manage the
Right.
sort of forward movement of X number of people. And
Hmm.
64 begins to be in that place where groups begin to splinter,
Yes.
and there's the ease of possibility. And maybe after, I think what Octavia asks us to wrestle with a little bit is, as the heat goes up and the
Hmm.
crisis level goes up, what is the moral responsibility to ensure everybody is on the same page?
Right. Right. I think what is the moral responsibility? And I also think it's hard to move, right? It's hard to move forward in progress
Yeah,
when there's such splintering.
yeah,
And it's hard to, and I think that she carried the weight and of the responsibility of that. One of the things that I appreciated is this view, I think, I guess it was their church when Marcus, came, her brother,
hmm,
and was like, okay, you can preach, you can do that, but you have to avail yourself for questions, because asking questions and dialoguing is what we do here. And so, on the one hand, where here is this belief system, here is this faith system that's available for you. It was offered, but like you said, it wasn't something that was, even with different privileges that went along with believing, there wasn't a force like you have to. And there also, it wasn't something where I feel like, oh, I need you to turn your brains off and just follow.
right,
I don't want you to think.
right,
And this is
right.
something I think really struck out to me, especially in this time where there's a lot of just turn your brain off and just blind trust, blind belief, blind thinking without rigor, and without probing. And actually, there's a quote that gosh, that I saw, and it was about like how thinking is basically, it's thinking is problematic, right?
Yeah, I remember
Thinking
that.
thinking is a problem. And what we saw in Acorn and in Earthseed was that thinking was actually required, like part of the process, the rhythm and of how they gathered. It actually promoted thinking, challenge, was there,
Yes,
and I
yes.
really appreciated that.
Doesn't that feel, and I know we'll dig into this a little bit more the next time. It feels like a mother's embrace of what religion would be like
Hmm.
versus a
Hmm.
male embrace. And I also think that
Well, that's
it's
interesting.
curious to me that Christianity, while, you know, coming from the Virgin Mary, is so
Hmm.
male in its embrace. The leaders of with the white crosses on their chest, and
Yes.
it's all everything describing um the point at which the rise of this power of Christian
Hmm.
nationalism, which is what it's
Hmm.
called in the book
What it's
too.
called very
um
plainly.
yeah, is this very military-esque
Hmm.
energy around dogma and what you will believe, versus a very feminine sort of opening
Yeah.
of potential and birth and
Yeah.
possibility. And
Ah,
so her growth there is so different. There's also an interesting piece, and I think we should probably set the stage for those who haven't read it yet, about
yeah.
the what happens at Acorn at a certain point. But something else that dawned on me in a conversation with someone the other day is, I do wonder about, in sort of curious, in white Christian culture versus a black Christian culture
Mhm.
versus sort of Jewish culture, which is what I grew
Mhm.
up in.
Mhm.
Like, very core, what I can speak to in Jewish culture is always questioning.
Yeah. Yeah.
The whole ritual. around many of the Jewish holidays is around the four questions,
Mm-hmm.
or this notion, even in books that aren't supposed to be necessarily rooted in religion but are about Judaism, like Elie Wiesel. It's always about like, why hast not always, but why hast thou forsaken me? Like that
Right.
ability to question so deeply God or whys that
Mm-hmm.
are what we're supposed to blindly believe. But it's not part of my culture to blindly accept without, some would say, a
Right.
rabid questioning, but
Right.
questioning nonetheless.
Right. I think that's such a great observation. And definitely, I think that, from my experience within um, evangelical spaces and being able to see, and in these spaces, I'm kind of like, I'm an outsider a little bit. It's not my formative upbringing.
Hmm.
It's very much, we don't want questions. Questions are actually dangerous. I think that I remember sitting in a class, and it was for children. And the instructor who poured her heart and put together this curriculum, and I was observing her teaching. And so these kids were like eighth, ninth graders.
Hmm.
And I was observing her rolling through, and I was like, wow, she never paused for questions. There was no dialogue,
Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah.
I brought that up because I was thinking, like, putting on my teacher hat, like, hey, this is like, oh, I meant to do it, but we just didn't get to it, or managing of time. And her response was, oh, no, we don't want their questions. If you let someone ask a question, then it can really get out of hand.
Wow.
And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
And I think it fits in here, like what we see here. I think growing up in the Black church, I never felt like I couldn't ask questions
Yeah.
and engage with my youth group leaders or things like that. We could talk about it. And there was a different expectation. It wasn't just, I'm giving you this, you believe it type deal.
Yeah.
Um, and we can see how harmful that is, just how harmful that is. And I wanted to circle back something about what you were saying about Lauren as mother and
Yeah.
that mothering, because I think that's such an interesting observation. And one of the things that I notice are, well, what other examples that shaping religion, right, and belief systems do we see in these books? And the first one is the father, you know,
Well, it is the father,
it's
and then
the father
it's Marcus
and
following in the
Marcus,
same.
the same
Right. And
vein.
then even the Christian sort of nationalism, it's
Yep.
like the
It's just,
way there is all the same. It's
it's
the
all the
same path.
same. Different racial background,
Yes.
different
Yes.
different status,
Yes.
but the way there, it's
Yes.
very dominant. It's
Yes.
very, I'm the head, you are the follower. I
Yes.
speak, I lead, you receive.
Yes.
Um, we didn't hear where in her household, because that's where her church, her father's church was. We had images of preaching. We knew there was preaching. We knew
Yeah.
there was singing. We knew there was
Yeah.
worship, but we didn't see engagement of questions. And
Yeah.
so her way of um, cultivating seed is
Yeah.
what it was, very different.
Yeah, there was a moment there was something, like, I want to make sure we do credit the part
Hmm.
of her father that was like, he did teach her lessons though.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
and I think that's probably the choice of the weaving of parables, because there
Yes.
were stories throughout. And I love how this book opens, where, because it opens and closes on
Yeah.
the same parable,
Hmm.
which is about what you do with what talents you
You
have,
have. Yes.
and whether you squander it or make use of it. And
Hmm.
that is the value there. But I do remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember even in the first book, like, they would go out to do something and he was sharp
Absolutely.
with her, and be
Yes.
like, no, don't do that. And afterwards he would explain, you have to let people come
Yes.
to it. You have to
Yes.
let, so there was like
Yes.
moments, because
Yeah.
her mother, who died young, so she didn't have a relationship with her, she was left in the care of a woman who never really embraced her as her
Mhm.
daughter,
Mhm.
truly,
Mhm.
because it was a second marriage. And so she had to become a mother even
Right.
before she was a mother.
Exactly. I think you're absolutely right. I think her father instilled in her, I think her father saw her intellect and engaged her intellect. And he
Yeah.
also was a dad who was like, I need you to make it. I
Yeah.
need you to survive.
Yeah.
I'm sewing in some life skills to you.
Yeah.
And I think we saw that, and she was able to really benefit and bring a lot of that with her. But what we didn't see him do as a preacher, as a pastor,
Engage in conversation,
is
or
engage in
yeah. Nope,
conversation.
nope, nope. Or be
It was
questioned.
yes, or in
Yeah.
questions or any of that. We didn't see that aspect of it. And for Marcus, where I think we were able to get, which is, her brother, the son, who follows in the footsteps of his dad. What we saw, I think, is an even more up close version of what that looked like, with him. And the fact that even though she warned him, yes, you can, you can have this faith. They're going to ask questions. That's what we do here. And then after that, it wasn't a space that he was like he could stay in.
No, because he thought he would outshine
That's right. That's
the
right.
questions.
Right.
His I don't want to say, maybe it was youthful arrogance. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
there's something to that, or maybe it's that, like, I read something in the book that sort of related to, like, when that ideology is like emotionally efficient,
Yes.
something like that. I'm saying it poorly,
Yes.
but his ideology fit what he wanted the vision of the
Mm-hmm.
world to be, but so did Lawrence. And
That's right.
so the question becomes, neither one of them was completely truthful,
Right.
yet to some degree her truth bore out in the long run as the book
Right.
ends. And unfortunately,
Right.
this was supposed to be part of a trilogy, and we lost Octavia, because I'm desperate to know what was
I
going to
know.
happen, because they do get to that place in the end, which when you first read it, go off to space, because it does evolve over time, because Earthseed. And
Excuse
it's
me.
interesting that she called it Earthseed to
Earthseed.
begin with, because I don't know that I understood it. And to your beautiful point before, like, before she kept it really close.
She
It
kept it
was her
close.
baby. She did not want, she wanted it to be true, but she didn't want to share.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that was? Like, what's your interpretation of that? What
I
happens?
I think like it came from a secret place, almost like a secret knowing. I think there was so much there. She loved her father
Yeah.
and she respected her father.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things, because she loved him so much and she respected him so much, I think she didn't want to hurt him.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think that this type of I'm experiencing God in another way, especially within the context of where we enter their life, right?
Yeah.
Of chaos. Um, that would not only have disappointed, I think it would have maybe made him so fearful for his daughter. And so I think that part of keeping it secret, um, and was a way of, I can't share this yet. I don't want to share this because this is especially in the beginning, it's things are coming to her. It's forming, these are forming thoughts. And I
Yeah.
think that it needed its space. It's almost like, a little kind of, I've never grown a plant from a seed. But I imagine it's so fragile and the tending is different. It's in a very vulnerable state. if you're like me and you haven't done it, which she had never done this before, you're like, can I do this? Can it work? Is it gonna, all of these kind of questions.
Yeah.
And I think that she knew I don't have anyone around me right now that can help fan the flame of this right now. So I
I
think part of it was
Yeah. I didn't
was
think about
was
the relationship with the
protection.
father there, but you're right. I didn't yeah.
Yeah. And I think that she was she was the type of person who I think had a sense of something bigger, like a bigger stage, a bigger weight, a bigger responsibility.
Yes.
She was grown, not in a grown way, but like in an old spirit
Old
way,
soul
an
spirit.
old
Yeah.
soul
Yeah,
way
yeah, yeah.
that I
Yeah.
think that she had. Her brothers would not have been able to understand and help at this time. Her mother, her stepmother, definitely could not
No.
have done that. Her
No.
father, if he hadn't maybe been afraid, like she never had that conversation. So who knows, right? How he
Yeah.
would have taken it.
Yeah.
But I think that that daughter's heart wanting to protect dad's heart, because she didn't ridicule her dad. She
No.
wasn't dismissive of his belief, or she didn't think it less than. It was just like it's a little different, or maybe I would say an evolution of of this. It's like your God and the way you think is here, and I'm up here, kind of with it.
Can
And
I
then
ask you though?
yeah,
Can I poke at that a little bit? Because
yeah,
here's the part I struggle with a little bit. I kept flip-flopping about whether or not Earthseed actually is a god, or whether it is a religion, or
hmm
whether it's a way of life.
hmm yeah,
Because what she
yeah,
was asking people, because they would poke and probe and push,
hmm
but ultimately she was saying it is your responsibility to take care of yourself and
yeah,
others.
yeah.
And the only thing that you know is that life will change.
That's
So
right.
God is in there and yet not in there simultaneously. So
Yes.
you don't give thanks to God for anything that happens. You don't curse God for
hmm
anything that doesn't go the way you want it, because it is life as itself.
I yes, I think that for that it became a religion and theology
Okay.
to me. Like I think I saw the becoming of that, especially once she had followers.
Yeah.
What are they following? I think that what Earthseed acknowledges, God is change. Everything you do shapes God. God is change. I The way I interpret it is like the God that's in you, like you shape your destiny. The God that's
Yeah.
it's like it's human centered God
Yeah.
versus maybe universal God,
Or maybe
in
this,
that
like,
way.
guy in the sky
Guy in
kind
the
of
sky God
casting
for her.
judgment.
I think that in the midst of my world is falling apart, I can't really depend. I've gotta figure it out.
Well, prayer's
Her
not gonna save us right now.
Right, prayer's not gonna save us right now. So
Yeah.
what saved her was my own sense of agency
Yes.
and my own sense of grounding reality of what is true in this very carnal world. Everything changes.
Yeah.
I have to be adaptable.
Yeah.
I don't need to be emotional about change, right?
No.
It's the change that's happening. It's not personal to me. What
Yes.
I can count on is that change will happen. And how can I accept, you know, deal with, prepare myself for change when it happens? I think that and how do I give myself almost these, I call it like almost these doctrines, almost these like
Yeah.
ways of living
Yeah.
guidelines.
Yep.
And it's
Yep.
like, here we are,
Yeah.
energy, mass, life, shaping life, mind, shaping mind. So we are life, but then she says we're life that's shaping life,
Right.
the God in. We're mind, but we're shaping mind. God, we're shaping God, you know?
Yeah.
So God is so as we're shaping the way I see it, like we're shaping God, you know. Consider we are born not with purpose, but with potential. And when I was thinking, well, what is the
I love
potential? The
that.
potential is to shape God. The
Yeah.
potential is to change. The potential is in the
Is to
agency
create.
is to
Yeah.
create in our
Yeah.
circumstances. That's the potential. And I think that in that way, I wrote a little piece about what leaders can glean from, this work. And in the midst of whatever situation you're finding yourself in, I think what Octavia is saying is you have the agency to shape change
Yes.
within that structure. And I think that that was such a radical, rebellious, defiant thought within her community, within her household, within the world that she knew, that to share that before there was solidness, maybe even in her mind, I think was risky, because as she was living her life, as she was having experiences, new verses and new thinking, deeper thinking and beliefs would come. So it wasn't something that she sat down and wrote at one time. It was something that came through her experiences that she had. And
Yeah.
in that way, I love how you mentioned mother, because we have been able to see her mother this, and we were not able to see her mother her own child.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I know we'll talk a lot about next time,
Yes,
because
yes,
as two women and mothers
yes,
ourselves, I know we're very excited to
yes.
get to that.
To get
But
to
I do
that,
think what we can talk about on the larger scheme is I think she was Ashavera, which, first of
yeah,
all, that was her name for, what was it called? The dream
the
something, the
dream, yeah, the
dreamscape.
dreamscape.
Yeah,
Yeah,
dreamscape, which I just was like blown away, because I thought, oh, well, that's just an AI like
that's right.
meta
That's
um,
right.
helmet thing where they're walking into a 3D world and playing,
That's right.
beat whatever that game is, Beat Saber. But and she would create those visions. But
Mhm.
in that, what is she knew about Earthseed, and she found herself conflicted
Yeah.
between Marcus, her uncle, who was very religious in the more
Mhm.
stereotypical Christian ideology, and yet did ultimately kind of reject her mother's
Mhm.
viewpoint of what Earthseed could be. And before we even get to the mother-daughter dynamics, it's just interesting because she was brought into a world. She was obviously, well, for those in the audience who haven't read the book,
Mhm.
there is something that happens at Acorn. Should we talk about that first and then
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Acorn turns from this sort of communal, sort of, I wouldn't say happy place, but a place
Right.
from which they can operate and begin
Yes.
to at least build the life. It is property that is owned by Bankol's family. And unfortunately, it's almost interesting because it comes with death to them in the first place, that when they arrive at
Yeah.
the end of the first book, basically his sister, husband, and children have been killed
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
And yet they they kind of resurrect and build upon it and honor the dead and, begin to create a life. And even when there is a devastating attack that happens about, I think it's 20 miles or so up the road, half an hour, whatever, at the other farm, like, these are like going back into communes, basically.
Right.
And they wind up being about 64 people. And at some point, they're attacked.
Right.
And
just devastating.
It is devastating. They're not just attacked, but they are attacked by Christian nationalists who believe them to be heathens, undercutting, God, and therefore blasphemous against God, and that all of the children that are there, which I think there's like, I can't remember, it's 10 or so, they all get taken, including her recently born
infants. Yeah,
she's only like 4 months, 5 months old, something like that.
That was hard. That was, I had to set the book down. It took me a while to get through this because
it's a hard book.
It's a hard book, and it was hard. That was hard. And I just, the despair that I experienced, I think just the despair, the calling back, I'm wrestling. This is a whole different line of conversation, but I'm wrestling with Octavia being called a prophet. I'm wrestling with that. I actually wrote in my book, like, I don't know, like, no, which is more unsettling to me. She just was a master historian. That there is the propheticness of like the warning of these things can happen again quickly.
Yeah.
And I think like that's where it is. But all of these things, it's like this is stuff that has happened.
Repeatedly.
Repeatedly.
I mean,
repeatedly of that humans have done to other humans.
I think the intro she taught there, I don't remember her name, but she talks about how, the white crosses on the chest, like crosses being used in sort of violent ways where, the KKK, the Nazis are the most recent for us, but it's also the Inquisition, the Crusades.
That's right.
So none of this is new, this sort of, violence of religious intolerance again. It's that whole.
She says one of my favorite lines in the foreword. I think about how evil is walking well-worn roads.
Yes. I remember
how that. It is, if you're paying attention, predictable.
Yes.
And she describes this story, this work as a brilliant gift. She says, or they say actually, the person who wrote the foreword, it is a warning and a map and a key.
Yes.
And I like the warning is there. And I'm like, what is the map and what is the key? You know what I mean?
No, I do know what you mean, because you're right. When I first saw Make America Great Again, I put the book down and I called you because that happens really early.
Yes.
And it really did take me by surprise. I mean, I knew we were on this journey, and I knew that in the first book it was setting the stage for something dramatic in the second. I just didn't think that it would feel so. I mean, it was already scary that it was on a similar time frame that, in the book, like the devastation that occurs, which is behind me, happens. I think it's between like 2019 and the late 2020s. So we're in that time frame. The rise of Make America Great Again in the book is a little bit later. It's more like 2032, 2030, somewhere around then. But to your point about it being prophetic, a map, and also a key, I found myself almost desperate to uncover, like, what are those aha moments, to your early question, about what does this book help me see what it means to be
Be
human in this
human.
place and time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that the biggest takeaway I walked away from was community and the
Yes.
power of community.
Yes.
And that was the only, and I hope you'll give me more keys, because that was almost the only one I could find. And I was
Yeah.
desperate to uncover, like, what are we going to be able to do to save ourselves from
Yes.
this, like, violence and us
Yeah.
and them, and this sort of cycle of
Mm-hmm.
anger and struggle and power and dominance, that it feels so unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. And so one of the things I loved that Akweki Imizi, who's another brilliant writer. I have her book, one of her books somewhere on my shelf. Here it is. I'm like, and she is a student of Octavia Butler. And this book I read, Freshwater,
Mm-hmm.
and or they are. And one of the things that they this what they offered about a warning, a map, and a key is like, if I say, okay, that's what we have to figure out in our conversations. I think that's the assignment. And I think that when you say community, I would say yes, and deeper into that, because in reality, the white nationalists had community.
Mm.
They had community. They fed people, they housed people, they educated people. Like, there was a sense of community that was there.
That's so funny. I didn't see
We
that,
didn't
because,
experience it as
well, no,
community,
because
right?
what I felt like was, even when they housed people and helped people, it felt like a jail. It felt like an institution,
It
because even what
did.
they said within those realms of being there, they had codes. So yes, there was community inside,
Yes.
but you're right. They must have community within agreed upon behavior of dominance.
Correct. But I would say to you, if you were on the inside of that, like for Lauren's daughter, who was on the inside of that, she felt like she had community. There are people, Marcus felt like he had community. And
Yeah.
so I feel like
Although she
community,
always knew the community was off. Like,
yes,
she knew that.
there is a knowing. There is a knowing, but I mean, we look at our time. Like, there's a
Yeah.
knowing,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
People, I think, know, but I think that people, it's very human for us to belong.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it
No, I
can
agree with
even
you.
go back to the before the book, in the gangs, right? The gangs that were setting stuff on fire. They
Yeah.
had community. It's not healthy community.
Okay.
There was the sense of destruction,
Okay.
but community was there. So I
Is
put
it a
community in the
description?
warning. I put
Oh,
community in the warning category.
okay.
Like,
Okay.
maybe we're being warned about community. Maybe we need to examine, you know what I'm saying, our community. I mean, we saw her have to examine the way in which she did community when everything went south, right? Um, and
It's
then I would
true. Yeah. Yeah. I am really sitting with that right now. That is really, because I think of, yeah.
I get what you're saying. I'm not in disagreement.
Oh, no,
I'm
no,
just
no, no,
I'm
but
just
I'm in
I'm
disagreement with myself here,
yeah.
dear. No, I'm thinking about, so, because what I was thinking about were the ways in which the people within our community can basically help or harm us,
Yes.
and how, and so cultivating
Mhm.
with the seed,
Mhm.
what is the community to grow. I didn't think of it from the other lens
Yeah.
of the, because I never, because while you say Marcus had community,
Mhm.
I felt like Marcus was sort of outside community. And while the people who came in and attacked them had community, they actually didn't have deep relationships, or at least the way they were portrayed. It was more like they were part of soldiers and in
Yes.
service, but not community.
Yes.
Community to me is about choice, not enslavement.
So this gets, I think, to part of the key, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to find this quote. So I think they're all different types of communities, but this quote on page 263 says, "Stupid faith was good faith. Thinking and questioning were bad." And that's what I think Octavia, like that's what she was
Mhm.
formed in, even in her formation. I don't know if she felt like she had the space to really question
Well,
and
she
have
didn't.
that
Look at her
back and forth,
friend.
which she didn't. And
Yeah.
so, but they had community. So I think when we have, like, if you say, well, what is the definition of community? There's shared values, there's shared interests, there is a sense of knowing and a foreness. Community in the ways that we have seen in other groups didn't require intimacy.
Mm.
It didn't
Yeah.
require, it required, I think, a very little sacrifice. I think it required people knowing the role that they play within the community. That it was very transactional, I think, in that way. And one of the, I think, keys is is well, I think thinking is a key, right?
Yeah.
Um, because the communities of faith outside of Earthseed that we saw didn't allow thinking. It didn't
Yeah.
allow for that. And it didn't allow, you use the word choice. It didn't really allow for choice to happen, in the sense that, no, you have a choice and you're still going to be treated as an important human being. There was a lack of, I think, generosity.
Yes, was because when as you're talking, I'm actually in my head playing with and not because I'm trying to be stuck on it, but there's community as a noun and there's community as a verb.
Verb, yes.
And
Yes.
community as a verb almost requires an attention
Yes.
and cultivation, which is,
Yes.
I think, tied to the seed itself
Yes.
and that motherhood that we're talking about, such that we are creating, and you and I have talked about this before, conditions for. So
Exactly.
conditions for thriving, conditions for learning, conditions for connection, conditions for dialogue, conditions for disagreement. And that is a rich soil.
Right. And one of those conditions, one of the keys, I think, or qualities that we see, she didn't judge. She saw, especially when the women turned towards each other intimately when they were held in captivity. She saw it. She was able to understand that the need, like at the root of the human need of it.
Yeah.
She didn't judge it. People weren't kicked in, or people weren't pulled in
It
or put
wasn't
out.
sin.
It
Yes.
wasn't, it was just, I think that in her way, which was imperfect, people were seen and dignified as humans around her.
Yes.
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 And I think that her daughter had to walk out something that no other human had to walk out, which is walking out this knowledge and knowing that my mother was devoted to something else more than it felt like she was devoted to me.
Yeah. There's a
And
lot.
there's a lot.
I
There's a
cannot wait to
lot.
unpack
Yes.
that part. I really
There's a
can't.
lot. There's a lot.
Can I ask
There's
you
a lot
though?
there. Yeah.
I love the fact that you brought up the way in which she describes the women turning to each other
Mhm.
in a need for compassion,
Yeah.
and that her concept of earthseed, something it didn't have was a concept of sin.
Right. Right.
But what is very core to a lot
Mm-hmm.
of other
Mm-hmm.
religions
It's
is
sin.
this concept of very
Yeah.
stark right and wrong.
Yeah.
Very stark.
Yes.
And that lack of guardrails
Mm-hmm.
around
Mm-hmm.
human behavior of what is right is wrong
Mm-hmm.
seems to be threatening to the Marcus,
Yeah.
the people who were Ashavira's parents, adopted parents.
Gosh. Just didn't like those people.
Well, no, I mean they're the Harry
Oh.
Potter aunt and uncle, you know.
Yes.
At least she wasn't in
Mm-hmm.
a closet under the stairs. But yes,
Mm-hmm.
there was and I guess that's why I don't see it as community. Just to loop that back because true community is and so let's go back to maybe it's not the word community, but it is the belonging you talk
Yes.
about, because it comes with an embrace or a value or we've talked about this before, assumption of
Mm-hmm.
everyone having wisdom to impart or
Yes.
value to bear or bring to that relationship.
Yes. I'm going to read, I've looked up this word community. It says a group of people who share something in common, such as location, identity, interests, values, or expressions, and who feel a sense of connection or belonging to one another. I don't think that so I think that what you're speaking to is the quality. So you as
Yes.
a reader was like, "Oh, I do not identify that as a community."
I didn't.
That is not a community.
I
That
didn't.
is yeah. Yeah.
Because
Right.
I don't know how you can be in community
Yeah.
with others who harm. And
Yes.
maybe that's
Happens
the deepest
all
part.
the
I
time.
know. Oh, I know.
Right?
I know.
Right? I mean, we see it on large scale and big and small scale. We
Yeah.
see it personal. We see it in workplaces all the
Right.
time.
Because it's a slippery slope to tribalism and
Mm-hmm.
into, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even, there's a fallacy around, some of it is just part of the fact that we are primitive animals. There was a story, I can't remember if it was Jane Goodall, and I hate saying the wrong thing, but there was definitely a story about how a particular set of chimpanzees, like while they had fights over the watering hole, there was stories of one group of chimpanzees who, even after the other group retreated, continued to hunt down
Right.
and kill.
Right. Right.
So there is somewhere in we are animals.
Right.
This part of our DNA that can engage in cruelty. And maybe that's part of why I reject anyone who is in commune with acts of cruelty and deny
Right.
that as a community. But I think you're absolutely right. I think it is a community by both the definition and the role that it plays in those people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
so we do
people,
need to
yeah.
find another word that helps sort of better define the
Better
conditions
defined.
for growth and embrace and inclusion and not about power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How she saw these people, she saw them as family.
Yeah.
And even that's tricky. I mean, that's
is.
all kind of tricky.
That's loaded
and
with other
tricky,
stuff.
triggering, loaded. And I think that, part of it is that maybe this concept is almost like an impossible idea. I think there's so much that needs to be tended to and done and continuously cultivated. And it's a slow work. I mean, one of the things I appreciated about this journey from the beginning to then, and then if we were able to continue in the third book, it's a slow work over You
It
know what I'm
is.
saying? Over time.
It
It's a
is.
slow cultivation. And everyone, including herself, that came into this space came from very lived through traumatic experiences, you know. And some of them have had their own, and all of them belong to something before, you know,
Yeah.
all of them belong to family. Some of them were slaves and they belong to that. And so I think that it is really kind of this, the things that she held valuable. I think that when I think about, like, maybe one of the keys is agency. I want them to think. I want them to learn. I want you to be able to teach what you know, to have a sense of agency, of survival, so that you can so that you can adapt. And I want you to have a sense of responsibility towards the other person. And not everybody at Acorn had that, but we did encounter people that did have that. And I think that that's what she was like growing, you know, towards, with which was this sense of accountability. I think she wanted people to feel safe, you
Yeah.
know.
I mean, she did push, like, even you're right that not everybody had that, but she did talk a lot about and being in service to others. And
Yes.
that was,
Yeah.
it was that sort of like, you're just a human, we're all just human.
Exactly.
How are we helping? How are we feeding earthseed? How are we tending it? I think what you keep talking about, though, is like this sense of, and I'm not going to do it justice, but like
Mhm.
purposeful,
Yes.
like intentionality. Like, it gets overused, the word intentionality, but it is like, as you're talking, I was making little notes about, like, what is the difference? It's like
Mhm.
agency versus dominance, or being dominated. It's
Mhm.
like listening and speaking versus, be quiet and be told.
Mhm.
It's one has conditions for a garden that grows on its own
Yeah.
free will, and the other, while it may provide people with more structure,
Mhm.
that structure becomes a prison.
Yes. Yeah. You know, it's funny because when I think about Lauren, I think that, oh, like, you are, living in the way of Jesus.
Mm. And she is, even
Like,
after
living in the
Acorn.
way after
That's right.
it collapsed,
Yeah.
after everything was taken down.
Yes.
Her care, her non like, she knew people's stories, she didn't judge people's stories. Love was never cut off. It was
Mhm.
always available to people.
Do you think
Also, when
Octavia
I think
wanted us to
about,
make that connection?
I don't know, but I'm reading this. I'm like, this is the way of Jesus. This is what Jesus walking around could look like. You
Yeah.
know, this is how even the woman that they met on the road in the
Yeah.
house, and the care for her heart of, like, I know she's lonely,
Yeah.
you know, and fixing up her place, and just that extra extension, that was there was so human decency
Hmm.
that she was able to show in horrible and confined, you know, spaces. And the fact that she was, which I've been sitting with, and I don't have, that she was the sharer,
Yeah.
and the sense of, like, how
The
from
hyper
my
empathy.
faith, right? Jesus took he took the sin, he took it, he took the pain, he took that.
Yeah.
And so, um I've been thinking about that as well. And so I think, and you know, but unlike, she's not perfect, right?
Mhm.
She's flawed and she's human.
But neither was
And
Jesus. I mean, those stories of Jesus also showcase where he's not perfect either.
so, yeah, that depending on your thing. Well, he walks with, for depending on your faith background and what you believe, he was without sin. For some to believe he was a prophet with sin. Um, but I think
Interesting.
that from the aspect of seeing a human in horrific circumstances, really hard challenges, even with her husband who wanted her to move, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I could get that, you know, and she wanted to stay. And then living through the consequences, living out the consequences of that choice, because, and that's one of the things I want to talk about, because I want to be careful not to glorify her.
Mm.
Um, I
Okay.
want to, like, I have this thing of like glorifying, and I want to like caution not to glorify, like, what would have happened to her people, what might have happened to her daughter,
Yeah.
to her husband, had they,
Had they left? Had they gone
moved,
to the
and
other
where
town?
was the
Yeah.
ego
Yeah.
anywhere in it to hold on to this and to build it in the way that she built it. There's so much.
Well, was it
Oh my goodness.
ego? No, I think that's brilliant. But was it ego? Like, so I don't know what drives people sometimes to do what
Yeah.
they do.
Yeah.
And I would love to circle back at some point to the defining aspects that makes her or makes her not closer to a Jesus figure. I think that's
I think that's, yes.
fascinating. And
Okay, so we have that. We have that on the list.
okay,
Go
all
ahead.
right. But what I do find fascinating is like what makes sometimes, I mean, we hear it all the time, like, nevertheless she persisted,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
to, you know, no one changes, and similar to Earthseed, she sought to change.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you can't do that without the friction
Yes.
against where other people want to walk away from the friction. And I know I'm not
Yes.
saying a lot there, except to
No,
say,
you
like,
are.
I don't know that she could have not, like, I don't know that she could have left, because it would have been giving up Earthseed, actually.
Correct. And I think that that's part of, especially as her daughter, which we'll talk
Yes.
about next time,
Yeah.
is sitting reading all of this.
Yeah.
So I
Yes.
have access to my mother's history, which means I have access to my mother's choices that impacted me in a specific way, at least of how she's going. And so I think like the question becomes, especially when you are a leader of a group, when you have a weight, and it doesn't even have to be a whole group. Sometimes it is, am I continuing down this road, which I know is dangerous, and
Yeah.
I'm continuing it down in a certain way, which I know is going to bring harm? Or do I pivot? It doesn't mean she needed to give up Earthseed. You know what I'm saying?
Well, but
But
look at what happened in Minneapolis. I mean, we can
yeah,
bring that right to here too,
yes.
which is two people lost their lives
Hmm.
because they stayed the course
Right. Right.
of friction, because without
Hmm.
friction, there won't be enough eyeballs. I mean,
Right.
I will never forget watching a documentary on Tiananmen Square, and there was discussion amongst them that they knew somebody had to die for it to get the kind of attention.
Tension that they needed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely right. And
I don't think
I
she
think
had
that,
that thought process. I think she also had a little bit of I think while she was pragmatic, I think that pragmatic side of her sometimes let her believe that they could easily navigate something that was as
that they couldn't.
devastating
Yeah.
as the attack.
That's what I 100% agree. I don't think that she thought that was a possibility for them.
No, no.
Not
I think
not in
there was
that
an
way.
arrogance there that
Yeah,
they knew
there was an
better, that
arrogance.
they
Yes.
had thought through all the things, and they had
Yes.
their way to run up through the woods, and
Yes.
they had their, the barrier secured, and
Mhm.
yeah, there was an
Mhm.
arrogance that, and actually just a softness that happens when we're lulled into safety for too long. And
Yeah.
that's part of what we're all going through right now.
Yes.
We've been lulled into safety for way
For
too
too
long.
long. For
And
too
I am
long.
I am super soft and will probably die in the if we move into really
Right.
like scary places
Yeah.
really quickly, because not many of us are. All right, my theory is humans are dumb. We've learned to think but turn off common sense, logic, and
Mm,
critical thinking for what we believe in the most: love, lust, hate, religions, pride, fear. Yeah, I
yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I
I
agree.
love that. We've learned to think but have turned off common sense. Yeah.
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 And
I
is
love
it
that.
because we're so, I mean, I think that we are in a, I mean,
Mhm.
there are aspects of this book that are fascinating to me because it required them to start over,
Mhm.
to live off the land again, to not be dominated by technology,
Yes.
to have to be in connection, family,
Mhm.
belonging in order to get through this world, to learn to think about how other people, even thinking about how might I, you could think of her as being manipulative because she
Right.
knew how to approach people and to get to the place that was softer or smart
Right.
or hyper empathetic or using her talents, of which that was one
Exactly.
of them.
And basically she was persuasive and charismatic and was able to
Yes.
get people to leave her, and that was part of her talent. But she was also bullheaded,
Yeah.
which you have to be a kind of that. And
Yeah.
I was really, she'll talk about with the daughter, was like, where was that persuasiveness with your daughter? Where was
Yeah.
the wooingness? I
Well, she
think
didn't have it with her brother either, though.
no,
So those
no.
people that were close enough to
Yeah,
actually cause a vulnerability,
yeah. She didn't
she
have
was
that.
harder. She was harder with Benkel
Yes, she
than she
was.
was with other people. She was
Yeah.
more,
Because I think that they would present a challenge
yeah,
that other people wouldn't. Her brother was like, "I'm not just blind following you,"
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Then
I knew
Coley
where
was
we
like,
grew up. I knew what
"I'm
our
not
father
just
wanted.
doing
Yeah,
that." Her
yeah.
daughter was, "I'm not just doing that." So that's why I'm like,
Mm,
I want to also kind of read and be able to kind of look at her and look at this and spend some time looking at that over there as well.
So what
Um,
about charisma? Because you said it.
mhm,
What about
mhm,
charisma do you think attracts followers and
mhm.
enemies at the
Oh,
same
both.
time? And
Yeah.
what is the key there? What is the lesson? Because outside of putting it in front of us, like this is just what happens, I don't I don't know that I know how one navigates that. So if you are trying to move the world for better,
Mhm.
it seems like that comes with it. There's no,
Absolutely. I mean, I think you have to have I think that leaders, world shapers, you have to have a sense of charisma. You have to have a sense of confidence that I can walk into a room and I can attract people and I can persuade them to my cause or to my thing. It doesn't and depending on who you are, what your mission is or your values, and what you want will determine who you're trying to attract, right? I have been watching this America's Top Model show documentary because Kyrie says, my husband, that I need to know what's going on in the culture.
mm,
So I'm like, okay, fine, I'll watch it. And I haven't learned anything new than when I thought about it when it came on years before. There is a lot of charisma, with that. I think that Tyra had, and I think that there was the draw or the look for people in that circumstance that were very vulnerable, that had low self-esteem,
yeah,
and in certain ways that was used in a negative way. But you
yeah,
also have examples of when it's used in a positive way. I think people who have that level of charisma, Trump is a very charismatic
yeah,
character, you
yep,
know?
yep.
And so I think, like, what does it look like to steward that gift well? We all
Well,
have gifts,
it's
and what does it look
interesting.
like to steward it
Yeah,
well?
because I don't think her brother has the gift. I think that's, there was an envy there
Yes,
that she commanded a room,
yes,
she commanded a space.
yes.
You and I have had this conversation on
Hmm.
other in other
Hmm.
ways without as much effort,
Right.
and yet he desperately wanted to
Hmm.
command that space. I mean, even
Yeah.
within the Jarrett's army or whatever, it was
Mhm.
called in the book, he wanted to be stationed places where he was the sole attraction,
Yes.
and that
Attraction,
was
because
his
he needed
flock.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, he needed that, and he wanted to have that. He saw that in his dad. He wanted to have it in a bigger, more legitimate way. He saw that in his sister, but that was corrupt and it was wrong and it was, all of this stuff. And then I also think we just have like the role of patriarchy and entitlement,
totally.
that was there, and part of his gift was his looks, and his beauty, that people were drawn to. The other thing too, I believed, which is the thing, it's like it's the water that runs under that people don't see, the deep thing,
Yeah,
is that she knows his story in a way that strangers don't. And there's that aspect of when you were a slave and what that did to you and what you had to do
yeah,
and how you were compromised
yeah,
and what that shaped in you, you know, that sometimes, and he probably wasn't healed, from that. And so it's hard to be a full man, confident, sure, when you have this other lived reality. And when I'm around somebody that knows that part of me, that rescued that part of me, it's hard to maybe be around them when I just probably compartmentalize and cut it off. And we know that that's part of how he lived his life because of
yeah,
what Ashaveri alluded to with his sexuality, that
yeah.
there was a cutting off, there was a compartmentalizing. And so his niece didn't, maybe from his mind, know the fullness. Maybe he didn't
Mm,
know that she had access to these, and to know that. And so I think like he maybe probably would not have been able to be the man that he thought was the correct man to be in, in around her presence. So I think that she threatened his aspirations, um but she also threatened, in part, maybe, aspects of his personhood
yeah.
that ran deep.
Well, it's
Um
striking because it's like craving of a simple story. Like,
Mhm.
I am this,
I am
and
this.
this is what I've always been. I was
Yes,
born into being this,
yes,
and therefore I am this.
yes,
And yet that is absolutely almost no one's lived experience.
right.
All of us have, the older I get, the more I realize that trauma is the currency and lack of trauma
Yeah,
is the exception.
yes.
And so, but there's still that shame
Mhm,
that's so inherent in all of it. And I think that while you're right to caution not to have her be a hero, there's such an honesty to her character
mhm, mhm.
that
Yep,
experiences that with a stoicism, with a
yeah,
resilience, with a persistence,
yeah.
that I would be honest that if I had to pick a character I'd want to be like in the book,
Yes.
I mean, I struggle. I don't know that I'd want to be her. I might want to be her
You
friend.
wouldn't want to
Yeah,
have her lived
that's
experiences,
right. That's
but
right.
definitely I think that that's like part of the key. I think that when we glorify characters, or I'll say for
Yeah,
myself, when I glorify a character, I put them on an other pedestal.
yeah,
It's like, wow,
yeah,
I would hope to be able to respond, versus what Lauren did was, I think she's like, I'm with the people. I'm taking myself off this. She's like
yes,
teaching people how to do what I do,
yes. I
sharing this
love that.
common language. And
Yes,
so I think that if we are able to, and her parts of her, the messy parts of her, like, think about it. She wrote her story.
yeah,
She was in control of her journals.
yeah,
She had a belief that these journals are going to be read someday, like this documentation of her life.
yeah.
And the way in which she documented her life showed her humanity and the fullness and the flawedness of it. And I think that um, allows her, it allows us to be able to learn questions or learn lessons in question. And I think it also allows us to be more like her in our circumstances.
But do you think there are things that she left out because she's still a human? Like, are there
Yes.
things that we will never like she shows a little bit like I disagreed with my husband or I
Yeah.
struggled with this part, but like she still seems so stoic and so like even keel and able to. I mean, we both have times when other people in our lives behave in a way and we're like,
Yeah.
"Are you kidding?" But she never
Yeah.
does that. She's like, "Okay, I'm a little frustrated." Like it's always
Yeah. I
this
don't think that we got the
outside.
rant and rave.
Yeah.
We didn't get the rant and rave journal entries where it's just like stream of consciousness, rant and rave. I think we got the I'm intentionally writing
Yeah.
journal. So I'm journaling in a different way. Intentionally, I'm trying this new thing where my entries are on blah, 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 you know,
But don't you
where
find that's true when you journal now? Like you and I have been
it's,
trying to engage in a journal, and what
yes.
stopped me was I'm always worried about who's going to read this.
Yeah, I'm not really bothered by so much who's gonna read this. I probably should be. But I and my journals are like all over. Like I don't hide them. I'm like, my family's like, oh gosh, she's gonna read from her journal again. Like I'm like, hey, Kyrie, listen, let me sit down. Let me read you this from this journal entry. But I think that there were one of the things I appreciated, which gets close to what you're talking about, is when she would notice, I haven't been able to write about this. I
Yes.
haven't been able to talk
Yes.
about
You're
this.
right. You're right.
I think that, like with Marcus, her brother, she did struggle about how she handled him,
Yes.
you know? And so we see that. I do think, like with the woman in the house, and she was like, there's a part of her that wishes that she just could have been a man or could have just shown up because I have longings too. I'm
Yeah.
lonely too, but I couldn't
Yep.
do that. And we saw her wrestle with that a little bit. And so I think like that aspect, along with the strategic thinking, the vision, the foresight, the ability to keep people moving forward despite that freedom warrior in her, we also have these aspects of I don't know what I'm doing,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I understand that he wants me to go here. Maybe I should. I want to say yes, but I can't.
Yeah.
Like that wrestling that we saw, that we were able to see. And I think like um that's what I like. She didn't have it all together and she wasn't sure. And I think that that's helpful for me reading her. Like, I'm not going to have it all together.
Well, she
Um,
she was a very accessible
yes,
character.
she was very
Um,
accessible. Mhm.
I also like we kind of skim over the fact that for a lot of both books, she's actually a man
Yes. Yeah.
in order for her to
In order
move
for her to move from
in the
place to
world in
place.
which she's
Yes.
in.
Yes.
And that's very purposeful. And I
Mhm.
wonder how that even informs her relationship with her
Mhm.
husband, the way in which she leads anyway.
Mhm.
I find that I find that fascinating. But again,
Yeah.
it's that purposeful
Mhm.
maintenance. You always talk about making sure that there's the space for listening. And I
Yeah.
do think that she has an intentionality
Mhm.
around keeping the space for questioning.
Yes. Yes. And I think it's like a core value
Yeah.
of hers. And the other thing I would say is that, and this gets back to Parable of the Talents, and I think it's one of the things that we get to walk away and sit by. No one in the cast of characters that we were exposed to and that we knew, no one was able to do what she did.
Mm.
Everybody, though, had a valuable part that they played,
Mm-hmm.
but nobody did what she did. And I think, like, you know, in the circles and the spaces that we occupy, like, to know that our talent is important, it's individual. Sometimes in the rooms that we're in, we're the only one with that specific talent,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, and how important it is to lean into that talent, even when you don't have, like, I know everything's going to work out, well with that. And also, I think I appreciated one of the things that's really blessed me in reading this that was unexpected is it started out very small. No
Mm.
one paid attention to it. If people knew, they would have mocked it. You know what I mean? It was insignificant. It was all of these things that in our very busy, when we live in a very type A resume title world that we live in, it's
Yeah.
very easy. It's very hard to cultivate your passions, your desires, your callings, because it can seem insignificant. And what I appreciated, I think most, one of the things about Lauren, like as a tutor, is her faithfulness. You
Yes.
know,
And I mean, I think it's the sort of, and it ties to Earthseed directly.
hmm
I mean, it's the be by doing,
yes,
not
yes,
the be by shouting, or the
that's
be
right,
by look at me, or the
that's
be
right.
by I'm going there. It's the subtle
Yeah,
dedication to the pathway
yeah,
that you just walk every day.
that's right,
And
that's right.
it's that kind of purpose that actually, because you're right, when you look at people who have created something from nothing,
hmm
it's a belief in that something
Yes.
that's bigger than you. And I mean, I think that kind of gets us to the end of the book
hmm
also, when they are getting on the ships,
Yeah, yeah,
that she, 2090, so
yep,
6 years later,
yep.
they're getting on spaceships
They're getting
to
on spaceships.
bring Earthseed to wherever they're going.
That's right. That's right. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I think, like, just that arc of potential and possibility, and leaning into that, and believing that you have space and it's important, and showing up, and also accepting that it's messy
Yeah.
and it's not all pretty.
And changing the
Um,
world is messy, and
and
changing.
changing the world is messy. Changing the world is messy. Um, oh my gosh, this has been so good. So good.
You're on time. Oh my,
We're so good.
I
So
have so
good.
much
So
more
good.
to
So
talk
good.
about.
I know. I know. We're going to save it for part 2 for next week. But I really,
I hope everyone goes out there and reads both these books.
oh gosh,
I
go
mean,
out.
they are life changing books.
They
And
are life
even though you
changing
won't
books.
remember all the, I mean, all the
It's too
highlighted
much.
things that you
It's too
point out,
much.
there
It's
are
too much.
concepts here.
It's too
And
much.
Chantel, let me thank you again for both having me here. But that last piece about the softness, the
Mm,
belief that you can do something, that it's small.
yeah.
It's kind of like always be reading. I mean,
Always
this
be
Books
reading.
with Friends is, hopefully you change in the world for people to continue to value the story,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
connection that stories provide.
I hope so, as I deeply believe that stories are medicinal, and I would echo to go out and read, get a copy of the books. These are my 2. Um, First time reading Octavia Butler. She does not sit in a genre that I read. And so I'm so happy Stephanie, did you say that we should read this? I think so, right? You
Yeah.
did.
Well, I
Yes.
said,
Thank
yeah,
you. Thank
yeah.
you, Stephanie, because it would not have been my pick. So that's why it is so important. I'm just encouraging not only to read it, but grab somebody in your life and read it with someone that you can have a conversation. Because I really think that that's my thinking has expanded because of this conversation. And so yeah, I definitely am a fan. But more than being a fan of the work, I do think that in these times, these books are a warning, a map, and a key. And there's not a human that can come to this work in these times and not receive something critical for these times to be useful in your life and how you maneuver. And I do think that circling back and just closing out with community, that community and the healthy, because we see unhealthy, but these healthy spaces of belonging, these sacred spaces of human connection. And we're going to come up with language that we are.
Yeah,
We're going to come up with language. By
it's
next
an
week, we'll
assumption
have
of,
some language.
well, I
We'll
will
have some
promise
language.
that. But I will, what I will promise is, if there's anything to impart, and
Yeah.
you brought us there months and months ago, is that if we can start with this premise that everybody has value to impart, even those that disagree with us, and we can get to a place of conversation, then I don't know, maybe we'll change the world one heart at a time.
Right.
But
that's right. Well said, Stephanie. With that, I think we'll just wrap up. So join us next Thursday for part 2 of our discussion of Parable of the Talents. And that's on the
all the
26th.
motherhood stuff.
All
And
stuff.
yeah.
And next Monday, I will be sitting with our friend Sean to be discussing Paradise by Toni Morrison. So I am still reading that, and whew, that's a book. So I'm looking forward to that discussion. If you want to continue the thinking between the conversations, that I do invite you to join me over at Substack, where I am having a really fun time writing about what I'm reading about and responding to what other people are reading about and their thinking. And so that's just a place where I get to kind of continue the thinking there. So thank you guys for hanging out with us. Stephanie, thank you for bringing Octavia into my life in a way that I opened the book and read, because she has been on my shelf. I just didn't, opened her and read her.
Thank
So
you
thank you
for
so much for
inviting me
that.
on the journey. I
Yes.
don't know that I could have done both books
Yes.
without you. I know that.
Yes. No, you will. Stephanie will be back. We'll find our next read. We'll be thinking about what we're going to be reading next together. And yeah, until then, you guys stay reading. Oh, and thanks to Montaigne. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful Montaigne, who helps put all this together. So yeah, that's all for now, guys. Have a great evening. Bye.